Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Clay, and I am the Bucks believer. Last night, we saw the Milwaukee Bucks punch their ticket to the Eastern Conference Finals as they came away with an epic overtime victory over the Brooklyn Nets. With that being said, it still remains to be seen who the Bucks' opponent will be in the upcoming Eastern Conference Finals. Tonight, the Philadelphia 76ers and Atlanta Hawks duke it out in a Game 7 of their own to determine who gets the right to play Milwaukee. I think that it's a very interesting conversation to be had about which of these two teams the Bucks would prefer to play. Let's start this conversation by breaking down each of the two teams and discussing how they match up against Milwaukee. We'll start with Philadelphia. This year, the Sixers took a huge leap, going from the 6th seed in last year's Eastern Conference to the 1 seed in this year's conference, as they finished with a 49-23 record on the strength of a terrific defense. The Sixers ranked 7th in net rating this year, which was boosted greatly by their 3rd-ranked defense, which made them a great team despite having a pretty mediocre offense, as they were just 13th in offensive rating. That's not due to lack of effort from their MVP candidate, Joel Embiid, who had a career season for Philadelphia. This year, Embiid averaged 29 points and 11 rebounds per game while shooting 54.5 in terms of effective field goal percentage. This was a massive year for Embiid in terms of his improvement on his mid-range game. Embiid has always been a dominant player at the rim, and now that he's fleshed out a mid-range game, he's pretty much a dominant post player, the likes of which we haven't seen since the late 1990s. Embiid also can space the floor a little bit and has shown the ability to knock down open three-pointers when given the chance. That, along with his terrific defensive ability that I outlined before, make him one of the 10 or so best players in the entire NBA and someone that is a complete headache for opposing defenses to deal with in a playoff-type scenario. I do think that the Bucks are pretty well equipped to battle with Embiid because of their possession of Brook Lopez. Lopez is one of the girthier players in the NBA as he stands 7'1" and 280 pounds, and he actually has a chance to rival Embiid's strength inside. That's going to force Joel to step out and work on that mid-range throughout this series, which is an area where he's strong, but not nearly as effective as he is at the basket. So I do think that that matchup bodes well for the Bucks, especially when you consider that when Lopez is off the court, Milwaukee can throw PJ Tucker, who is quite undersized but still very strong, at Embiid. As we saw in the past series against the Brooklyn Nets, Tucker is a very pesky defender on any sort of player, as he spent time on Kevin Durant especially, but also James Harden in that series, and I would like to see what he can do against someone as talented inside as Joel Embiid. After Joel, Philadelphia's second option on the offensive end of the court is Tobias Harris. Harris had a career year himself as he averaged 20 points and 7 rebounds per game while nearly qualifying for the 50-40-90 shooting splits club, as he is an incredibly efficient scorer from the field. Harris has slowed down in the playoffs, and there have been times where it feels like he's invisible for the Sixers. In a recent second half against Atlanta in which Philadelphia couldn't get anything going on offense, Harris did not attempt a single shot in the entire half, so that shows just how timid he can be at times. When you consider how many good perimeter defenders the Bucks have in Giannis Antetokounmpo, PJ Tucker, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and the amount of guys they're going to be able to throw out Harris throughout this series, I don't really see him being able to get going in the way that he did against the Washington Wizards earlier in the playoffs, but he is someone who's capable of getting into the high teens every single night and is going to be a key cog in the Sixers offense if they want to have a chance to beat the Bucks, especially if Embiid struggles with injuries, which, considering he has a partially torn meniscus, is quite likely. We've seen Embiid also slow down in second halves as he just doesn't have the amount of energy and endurance to continue to play at the high level he has in first halves during this playoff run. So that injury stuff with Embiid is definitely interesting to keep your eye on. Ben Simmons is the third player on the Sixers as he completes their big three. He's probably their second best player but he's definitely the third option on offense and maybe even the fourth option behind Seth Curry. But getting back to Simmons, he had a solid year this year, making the All-Star game for the second consecutive season, I believe, and averaging 14.7 rebounds and 7 assists per game. Similar to Harris, Simmons can be quite timid when it comes to shooting the basketball, as he doesn't really like to shoot from anywhere outside the paint. When he does get going at attacking the basket, Simmons is a great finisher, particularly in transition, and he's also a really nice playmaker in transition for his teammates. The area where Simmons really struggles is free throws, as there have been games where the Hawks have resorted to a hack-a-Simmons strategy in the second half of games this series. There was one game where Simmons shot 4 for 14 from the line, and he received a lot of criticism from the NBA media as a result of that poor shooting performance. Overall, Simmons is a stellar defender who will spend a lot of time guarding Chris Middleton and Giannis Antetokounmpo in this series if it does happen, but because of his offensive limitations, I don't exactly see him being someone who can win the series for the Sixers. In addition to their big three players, Philadelphia relies on a lot of production from their role players. The most important of these guys, in my opinion, Danny Green, is actually out for the foreseeable future with a calf strain. Green brings a lot to this team, both as a shooter, where he was upwards of 40% this season, and as a defender. There are a lot of role players on this Philly team that can do one thing or the other, but Green really puts them both together, and his absence is going to hurt this team. They do have guys who can step into that role, as Seth Curry and Furkan Korkmaz are both knockdown shooters. This year, Curry had a great season in his first in Philly, as he averaged 12.5 points per game and shot 45% from the three-point line. If he can get it going from three, he can single-handedly swing games in Philadelphia's favor. Korkmaz is a little bit less effective as a shooter, as he was 8% lower than Curry, shooting 37% from three this year, but he is also capable of getting hot and is someone who definitely stretches out the opposing defense. Outside of those two, Philadelphia has some solid defensive options in Matisse Thybulle and Tyrese Maxey. Maxey has had a couple really nice games against Atlanta, including a huge Game 6 performance where he really kept Philadelphia in the running for that win during the first half. Thybulle is a great defender, but he's very limited on offense, where he shot just 30% from three this year. So with those role players, they all have their flaws and they all have their pluses. So I don't necessarily see any of them as being a swing in the series against the Bucks. With Philadelphia, they're a strong defensive team that really counts on Embiid and Harris to carry them offensively. Because of a lot of injury stuff, I don't see them being as threatening as they were coming into the playoffs, but this is still a very solid squad nonetheless. Moving on to Atlanta, this season the Hawks went 41-31 to finish as the surprising 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. Coming into this season, a lot of people picked the Hawks to make it at the bottom part of the Eastern Conference playoff picture, but I think that anyone would be shocked if you told them coming into the year that Atlanta would finish above Miami, Boston, Indiana, and Toronto. So this was definitely a huge year for the Hawks in terms of improvement. In Atlanta ranked 12th in net rating this season on the strength of a strong top 10 offensive attack. They're a little more limited in what they do on the defensive end of the court, where they were just 17th in defensive rating this season. But nonetheless, this is a very solid squad that is similarly reliant on a star, as was Philadelphia. That star in Atlanta's case is the youngster Trae Young. Young had a really good season for the Hawks this year, averaging 25 points and 9 assists per game while shooting a 50% effective field goal percentage. That was a bit of a step back from where he was last year, but Young has absolutely exploded in this season's playoffs. In these playoffs, he's improved his per game averages to 30 points and 11 assists while shooting relatively same in terms of efficiency. Young is a high-level shot creator for his teammates, who is also excellent in ball handling situations. He's one of the best pick-and-roll ball handlers in the entire league and is great both at pull-up jump shots and floaters in the mid-range. He also has great chemistry with his big men in Clint Capella and John Collins, and is one of the best lob passers in the entire NBA. Young by himself makes an offensive scheme work, and he's going to make the Bucks work for sure on the defensive end of the court if this is a matchup that comes to fruition. I think Milwaukee would likely spend a lot of time with Drew Holiday covering Young, and they could also certainly put some of their other guys like Pat Connaughton or Chris Middleton on Trey, but overall Holiday is the clear best matchup and someone that I really think could have an impact on how effective Young could be if this series were to come to fruition. The second best and second most important player for the Hawks in a series against the Bucks would be their big man Clint Capella. As I talked about, he is a great rim runner who can throw down lobs from Trae Young on the roll. He averaged 15 points and 14 rebounds, which led the league in terms of rebounding this season. He also does a great job on the defensive end of the court, where he averaged 2 blocks per game this year. I think he would have an even more key role in a series against the Bucks, as in my opinion, he would probably be the guy who spent the most time defending Milwaukee's superstar, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Capella has the necessary length and strength to prevent Giannis from being able to easily score at the rim. I question how well Capella could guard Giannis on the perimeter, but because that strategy for Atlanta will likely be to make Giannis beat them from the perimeter, he probably won't have to. So I do think that Capella could really make this series tough for Giannis, and because of that, could make it tough on the Bucks as a whole. The third best player on the Hawks is John Collins, their young power forward who had a terrific year, scoring 18 points and grabbing 7 rebounds per game while shooting a terrific 61% effective field goal percentage. Collins does a great job as a pick-and-roll rim runner, similar to what Capella does, and he also adds a different niche to the Hawks offense, as he also can threaten opposing teams from the perimeter as a pick-and-pop big guy. His scoring ability is the best thing that he does for the Hawks, and if he's able to get going against the Bucks offense, it certainly could be a key in sparking Atlanta's offense. If he's able to get going against the Bucks defense, it could spark the Hawks offense. Collins could struggle a little bit in this series, as he probably would be guarded a lot by Giannis Antetokounmpo, a guy who was the reigning defensive player of the year up until a couple days ago when he made another all-defensive team. But so we could see that hurt Collins' production, but all the same, he's going to be able to put up some points against the Bucks. The last guys I want to talk about here with Atlanta are the trio of Kevin Huerter, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and Danilo Gallinari. All three of these guys are knockdown shooters and capable shot creators who are all super capable of getting hot and winning games for the Hawks. We've seen Cavs where Huerter can score upwards of 15 points, Gallinari can score upwards of 15, and Bogdanovic is also capable of having that type of explosion. Bogdan in particular could have a huge series against the Bucks because there was the controversy with Milwaukee potentially doing a signing trade for him that eventually would fall apart. So these three players would be very key to the Hawks in this series, and if any of them could get going on any given night, it could put Milwaukee in an incredibly tough position. Finally, I do want to touch on Atlanta's absence of DeAndre Hunter. Hunter is their best perimeter defender, who is also a capable shot creator on offense, so the loss of him for the rest of the season is huge. He would probably be their primary defender on Chris Middleton, and another player who could stretch out the Bucks' defense on the offensive end of the court for Atlanta, so his loss is a big one. However, I still think Atlanta has enough shot-creating juice that their rising star and great group of role players will make them a very tough out, regardless of who's healthy and who's not when it comes to talking about Hunter. Overall, it's pretty clear that Philadelphia is a better team than Atlanta when the Sixers are completely healthy. Unfortunately, that is simply not the case at this point. Embiid has really struggled with high minute loads because of his partially torn meniscus, and the absence of Danny Green is also a massive load to the Sixers. Those injuries, with the addition of a lack of perimeter scoring for the Sixers, makes Atlanta a surprisingly scarier matchup in my opinion. I don't think that there's a huge difference here, as both Trae Young and Joel Embiid are incredibly difficult players to play against in the postseason, but if I were making a pick here, I'd have to say that Philadelphia is the team that the Bucks should be wanting to play in their upcoming Eastern Conference Finals. That's surprising for me to say, but it is what I personally believe. Let me know which of these two teams you would rather play if you were in the Bucks position in the comment section down below. Also, let me know what you thought of this video. What did you have a gripe with? What did you agree with? Let me know. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe, especially if you are a fellow Bucks believer. This is the place for you. I think that I've covered everything that I wanted to cover, so that's going to be it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all again very soon.